et Air Canada. À vous la parole.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. After 8 months of negotiations and weeks of intensive mediation, Air Canada and the Canadian Union of Public Employees flight attendants were unable to reach a tentative agreement. The government firmly believes that the best deals are reached by the parties at the bargaining table, and we will never stop believing that. Le gouvernement croit fermement que la meilleure entente de convention collective se conclut par les parties au moyen de la négociation. Nous ne cesserons jamais de croire en cela. It's not easy, but when parties put in the hard work at the table, Canadians are better off as a result. Ce n'est pas facile, mais quand les parties mettent de l'heure, ce sont les Canadiens qui en gagnent, sortent gagnants. However, in this instance, and despite resolution on a number of key items, this dispute will not be resolved quickly enough. And the impact of the work stoppage at Air Canada that began early this morning is already being felt by travelers. This is causing significant harm and has negative impacts on Canadians and the Canadian economy. It impedes the movement of passengers and critical cargo, such as pharmaceuticals, and it strands thousands of Canadians abroad, making it extremely costly and sometimes impossible to book new flights. Canadians have already sacrificed a lot in this uncertain economy, and this labor disruption is adding to their worries and financial burdens. As Minister of Labour, I have exercised my authorities under Section 107 of the Canadian Labour Code to direct the Canada Industrial Relations Board to order the parties to resume and continue their operations and duties in order to secure industrial peace and protect the interests of Canada, Canadians, and the economy. I've also asked the board to assist the parties in reaching a settlement of the outstanding terms of their collective agreement by imposing final and binding arbitration, and to extend the terms of the existing collective agreement until a new one is determined by the arbitrator. Flight attendants play a critical role in getting Canadians to where they need to go safely, and they deserve to be compensated and treated fairly at all times. My job as Minister of Labour isn't to take sides during labour disputes. It's to give the parties the tools that they need to reach a fair and timely agreement while keeping the best interests of Canadians at heart. And that's why I intervened today. Canada's economy has seen unprecedented attacks on trade and significant tariff actions. Amid these challenges, Canadians have been stepping up for months to support their friends and their neighbours and their local communities. In a year where Canadian businesses and families have faced too much disruption and uncertainty, they shouldn't have to shoulder another blow. We will not leave them behind. This is not a decision that I have taken lightly, but the potential for immediate negative impact on Canadians and our economy is simply too great. Labour disruption impedes the movement of passengers and critical cargo. Canadians rely on air travel every day, and its importance cannot be understated. Many Canadians need to travel to care for loved ones abroad or deal with critical life events, such as funerals or adoptions. The shipments of critical goods, such as pharmaceuticals and organ tissue, should continue to reach their destinations. And we believe that hardworking Canadians who have been saving up for family vacations should be able to enjoy their well-deserved and planned time off. Now is not the time to take risks with our economy. A work stoppage would cause thousands of Canadians to be stranded abroad and across this country, and this is simply unacceptable. Last year, Canadians paid a high price when multiple key sectors went on strike. Inaction at the bargaining table had a massive impact on Canadian families and our entire economy. These parties have had months at the negotiation table. They've had support through the Federal Mediation Service, and they have been unable to cross the finish line. Arbitration is the most stable way to conclude this process for Canadians while allowing parties to reach a deal. If we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7, Canadians need to have confidence in the industries that serve them. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to questions now. One question, one follow-up. We'll start in the room. Jeremy Charon, CTV.
Good morning, Minister, or good afternoon. the government has now stepped in countless labor disputes. There are experts who point to, this having an impact on and advantaging really employers in a negotiation. Is there a concern about undermining the labor system, and are you confident that workers' rights are still being respected?
I think that it's very important to reiterate my first statement, which is that the best deals are arrived at the table, not just because this is good for workers, but because it's good for stability and peace within the organization. Strikes are very disruptive to the culture of the organization. They're very expensive for the members who are often experiencing significant loss of pay, and they're very challenging for the corporations who are losing revenue and reputation every single day. Having said that, in this particular instance, we do believe that it's very important that we establish industrial peace and that we focus on the growing cost to Canadians, Canadian families and Canadian small businesses. So this is a tool that allows for arbitration. There are many items that have been resolved between the two parties, and this will give them an opportunity to resolve the remaining items.
Thank you. My follow-up is on impacted passengers. Should Air Canada be liable to fully reimburse passengers who've had canceled flights or, paying their full way for a replacement flight?
Listen, I don't want to speculate on the impact to Air Canada and what their corporate practices are. I know they're deeply concerned about the passengers that are stranded around the globe and here in Canada. And last night, and speaking with the parties, in fact, that was one of the first items that the employer raised, was the work they're putting into trying to ensure that whoever is calling into their call centers has somebody on the other end. It is important, though, that we keep the safety, security, and financial security of Canadians first and foremost. And it would be my expectation that we all work together to get people home.
Next question will be Kyle Dugan, Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. Can you tell us what changed between yesterday and today that you weren't willing to step in yesterday, but today you've come to the conclusion that clearly something needs to be done? So could you just give us a little bit of insight into your thought process and how you weighed the policy options ahead of before you?
I think what changed between yesterday and today was that I asked the parties to meet with me collectively together in the same meeting. I met with Air Canada and with the union representatives, as well as the national president of CUPE. We talked through what was remaining in terms of the perspectives of the parties. The parties committed to staying at the table throughout the night, which they did. There was an offer tabled by the employer, and the talks broke down. And so it is clear that the parties are no longer, are not any closer to resolving some of the key issues that remain, and they will need help with an arbitrator.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, I'm wondering, how long will it take before things kind of start to return back to normal and some of these flights come back online? Do you have a sense of that, how long the Labour Board process will?
The CIRB is an independent body, and they will review and receive statements from the impacted parties, and then they will make their determination about whether they will intervene. And so that will take an according amount of time. Don't want to speculate because it is a process, but in general, sometimes it can take 24 to 48 hours for the board to complete that work. Again, that's a question for the board. However, Air Canada has said it could take between 5 to 10 days for regular services to resume. And again, I think that's a question for Air Canada in terms of their complex operations that one needs to happen for full resumption of services.
Marina von Stackelberg, CBC.
Hi, Minister. Unions are taking your government to court over your really unprecedented use of Section 107 of the Labour Code, which gives you the unilateral power to essentially, as you're doing today, order striking workers back to work. The unions say this is unconstitutional, that it violates the right to strike. Why does your government continue to use this Section 107?
Well, actually, just recently, I think the CIRB affirmed that in one of the recent disputes, the use of 107 was constitutional. And of course, I know there are a number of pieces of litigation. But listen, in today's decision, this is about industrial peace and the safety of Canadians. Of course, any deal is best if it's arrived at between the parties. But as we can see, and as I believe that some of you are reporting on, there are a number of extremely difficult situations and increasingly dire situations that Canadians are facing. And we believe that the Industrial Relations Board will help these two parties conclude their negotiations on some key items.
Experts that I've spoken to about the use of 107 say that the government's repeated use of this is poisoning negotiations because companies believe that they can kind of bargain to an impasse and then the government will step in and prevent a strike from happening. Why did you choose to use 107 so quickly here? I think this is the fastest use of it I've seen. Is your government anti-union?
I absolutely reject the notion that our government is anti-union. In fact, under the previous Liberal government, we considerably strengthened the Canada Labour Code. We banned the use of replacement workers, and we stood side by side with unions in terms of supporting their work, not only in labour negotiations, but also in training and recruiting new members. And so this work will continue. We believe that unions are an essential part of a healthy and growing economy. However, in a case like this, where multiple efforts have been made to conclude an agreement that satisfies both parties, and it is clear that they are at an impasse, it is very clear they need some help in arbitrating the final items.
We're now going to take questions from Zoom. If you have a question on Zoom, please raise your hand. S'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction main levée pour signaler une question. Okay, our first question is from Fatumata Trattori from Radio-Canada.